executive director of MassBike, but now I'm an active transportation consultant. And in that role, I provide technical assistance to the Mass in Motion program statewide on active living and specifically on bike-related things, largely policy and community engagement. And I've worked with Mass in Motion communities all over the state. So we work generally on changing policies, systems, and environment. So kind of trying to get at active living from a high level to make sustainable changes, more than a one-off programmatic level. And I'm happy to see so many people here today, including so many familiar faces. It's good to see all of you again. And I think we'll have some really interesting discussions today. And for those of you involved with Mass in Motion, I hope this sparks some interesting ideas that may require technical assistance. So you know you can come to me if you need that, or any of the other TA providers in Mass in Motion. And I hope everybody has a fun and informative day. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And I'm very grateful for the Department of Public Health and Dave Watson for helping with the funding for this. We're putting on 3 of these. This is not easy. It's not cheap, but it should be very productive. The point of this summit is to kind of introduce your roles to others and other roles to you. So we're really trying to cross-pollinate. We're really trying to find the overlap of the Venn diagrams. We have planners, we have deciders, we have engineers, we have advocates, we have educators, we have coordinators. We have people who are focusing on public health, we have people who are focusing on transportation, people who are focusing on infrastructure, and people who are focusing on cultural aspects of things too. And then all the conversations that you're going to be having on the breakout sessions. The way that we've been doing the past 2 summits, and I'm hoping that today will go too, but again, very fluid, is that we have 3 big topics that we're going to cover. And these topics were decided when we did a survey of the Mass in Motion coordinators of what were the main interests and needs related between public health and bicycle advocacy. The 3 that always popped up time and time again were the Complete Streets policy program of how does Complete Streets, not necessarily what is Complete Streets, but more as how is it being implemented, how is it successful, what are the challenges, and how is it working. So we're going to talk a lot about the origins of Complete Streets and what's been going on around here. So that's a big bucket. And then another issue was the network planning. So not just this street, this intersection, but how does it connect? How do the sinews go from the neighborhood to the bike path, to the park? What's the real benefit to having a network plan really is to focus on priority populations, people who might need to ride the most. So we're going to kind of be diving in a little bit there. We'll talk high level with a statewide bike plan and then a local network plan as well. So you can think broad as what's going on from the DOT side of things, and then more local from the Planning Council side of things. And the third topic is about education and community outreach. I'm a big, passionate believer in bike education as one of the biggest needs out there on all ends. So this is a very important bucket to throw into there. But we're going to have representatives from the Safe Routes to Schools program, which is a statewide program, and then a local advocate to talk about compassionate advocacy. So that it's not just rah, 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 or forcing it, but how do we actually put the right framework around our work to really get into the minds and hearts and souls of the folks who we're trying to influence. And hopefully for the lunch portion, we're going to have representatives in the 413 Bike Life, which are the youths who have a very strong cultural movement going on in Springfield right now. It's about recreation, it's about socialization, it's about culture, and it's also about repression and facing adversity with authority. So we'll be getting into that too. At the end of each topic, I am hoping to have breakout sessions where we kind of split up into groups and scribble on whiteboard papers. So be prepared to be interactive. It's very hard to be interactive and try to force it in a setting like this where somebody is talking at folks for most of the day. So I want you to, and I don't think we're gonna have a problem with this group, knowing a few of you already, I want you to chime in. And I want you to get your voices down. If you're an introverted person, great, write it down on the piece of paper. If you're an extroverted person, shoot up your hand and share it with the group. But this is not a one-way conversation. The whole point here is to cross-pollinate once again. Cool, and then with that, I'll kick us off by talking a little bit about what we think of as bike advocacy in terms of the 5 E's really it's 6 E's, but I'll get into the sixth one in a minute. But this is how we think of bike advocacy. There could be a lot of E's that are out there, but the 5 that we really like to focus on are engineering, education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. I put them up here behind me on the board here, so this will be a reminder. So when the presenter is speaking, think about these 5 E's in the context of the topic. Every topic is going to be a little different. We're going to have a topic about engineering, we'll have a topic about education, etc. But all of these 5 E's play into each other. And then there's one E, which is the equity E, which pertains to every single one of these. Some folks have a 6th E of equity, but I don't like to do that because that separates it out and kind of makes it segregated from the other 5 as a topic to focus on. But really, it's a topic that influences all 5 of these. Now, being a part of the Mass in Motion program was really illuminating, and we have 4 questions which I learned from Mass in Motion, which talk about, we call it the racial justice reframing questions, or what I think of it as like, how do you actually approach equity? And put these 4 questions in the back of your mind. Come take a photo of this so that you'll always be reminded of it. The 4 questions that we have are, who benefits from anything, from your topic, from your issue? Who is harmed? Who influences? And who decides? So keep those 4 questions rolling in the back of your mind at each of these presentations, knowing that these presenters are not framing their topics and their PowerPoints around these. So it's up to you as audience members to kind of force fit that lens on all of the issues. But the idea here is not just to tell you an update of a plan or a project or a policy, but really to think about, as David was saying, the systems change that we are really seeking. We have amazing policies that we will discuss, which allow processes to take place, which will put the changes we want on the ground. But really, we are really looking for a cultural change. I think that's why we're all here as advocates, and we do this in our work and why we get up every day. So, this is the framework that I want to lay out there. With that end of the preamble, I want to open it up to any initial thoughts or any initial questions. If something is ready to jump off your tongue, please let me know. Tom.
Hell yeah.
Oh, and I would be remiss, I'm so sorry, I want to thank Tom, our staff here at MassBike, for coming to all 3 of these summits, for helping me set this all up. We would not be able to do this without Tom helping me out. And this is not MassBike alone, but we're traveling a lot. We're carrying a lot of the burden, and I appreciate you, Tom.
A lot of driving and bike advocacy.
Yeah, we're doing it. And more than anybody I know, Tom knows every single road in the Commonwealth. So if you've got a question about this intersection or this merge, talk to Tom, because I guarantee he's ridden it. It's amazing. Great. Cool. With that, I think I want to jump into the first topic, which is basically the complete streets. We may...
No,
again,
B's here.
Oh, B's here. Okay, great. Do we want to kick off with you, B? Are we okay putting you on the spot?
Come on, we're doing this together. So.
Cool. All right, cool. So we're going to combine. So you'll see on your agenda, we may have shuffled a little bit. Yeah, so we're going to combine Betsy and Beatrice to talk about complete streets, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Betsy, but complete streets, how it got really rolling here, and what the community outreach is going on around here. And again, yeah, you want me to throw that in?
Yeah. Do it that way, or do we want to put it on a drive?
Well, it looks like, can I see the board? HDMI? Yeah. Or actually, we don't have HDMI.
Do you want me to just?
Yeah. Pardon us for the technical difficulties.
Well, even the debate people last night had technical difficulties. So.
Pause for a sec. I'll at least introduce myself.
Thank you.
I'm Beatrice Dewberry. I'm with Wayfinders. I'm Beatrice Dewberry. Is this any better? I can't talk like him.
I got a booming voice. This is
Yes, you can.
my teacher voice.
Exactly. Okay, I'll try to do the teacher voice. Beatrice Dewberry. I'm with Wayfinders, Community Building and Engagement Manager at Wayfinders. A lot of people know us as formerly HAP Housing, so a lot of people know us as a nonprofit housing organization, but we are actually a community development corporation here in Springfield. We've been here for 40 plus years, and we're sort of venturing out in different areas beyond housing for the past few years. And one of the areas that we've ventured into with my line of business, which is community building and engagement, is public health. So a lot of us in this room know that public health includes the built environment, includes where we live. So I'm here to talk a little bit about our advocacy efforts around the built environment issues with Betsy. So I'll let her introduce herself too.
Betsy Johnson, a seven-year resident of Springfield after many years in downtown Boston. Much more affordable living out here. And let's see. Okay, and she's now put. And one of the things that I will talk about, we'll talk about is one of the things I got involved with when I just moved out here was the effort to improve walking and biking conditions in Springfield. And we formed forming a new just a group of residents. We call Walk Bike Springfield. No particular nonprofit sponsoring us, no funding, just folks who share our concern, who started meeting monthly and 4 years later are still meeting monthly and doing things. And we'll go through some of the things we've been doing. So that's who we are. And
I just want to add that with we at Wayfinders, the initiative that we're actually working under is we do have funding, which is always a wonderful blessing. So we are funded through Bay State, Mercy, which is our two local hospital institutions, as well as the Tufts Health Plan Foundation. So primarily under the Mercy grant, which is known as the Transforming Communities Initiative grant, we do work around complete streets prioritization. Under the Tufts Health Plan Foundation grant, we've been working with seniors who building their capacity as advocates. And the seniors have identified the agenda. And for them, the agenda is complete streets prioritization and safe routes to school. So we were really happy to see our residents of color. We work predominantly in one neighborhood in Springfield, which is majority brown people. It's the Old Hill neighborhood in Mason Square area. And they've identified infrastructure issues. We call it infrastructure justice. That's a term we tout all the time. And that's because a lot of our residents have said there's sort of this misperception that people of color aren't thinking about their built environment. They're not connected to these issues. But we've got a strong group of 20 advocates who are ready to tell you that's wrong.
Slide toe. All right, so it is okay.
No, I went too far. Sorry.
You went too far.
Okay. Sorry.
Now we've lost it.
Now
Now
Try
we've
F5.
totally lost it.
Oh,
Look at
sorry.
our speed. We're technical. It's like the debates last night. We couldn't keep it.
Yeah. How many watched the Democratic debate?
And they all kept running dark. They kept going dark on us, like this.
What's it? Blue.
Good idea.
Tropical color.
Well, I'll start to describe what was on the slide. And how did, there was actually a funded and organizational initiative that really sort of helped spark getting Walk Bike Springfield going. And that was in the summer of 2014, an organization called Live Well Springfield, together with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Catherine, raise your hand, yes. And she was the convener, together with MassBike, had a grant to work with the city of Springfield to pull together folks in Springfield to develop a complete streets policy and plan. And they went out and reached out to the different neighborhood councils and neighborhood folks and folks they knew were interested in walking and bicycle interests. And so an ad hoc group, advisor group was founded, and we met at least a half dozen, I think about 8 times during the summer fall of 2014 and came up with an initial complete streets, learned about complete streets, and came up with a policy and plan that is still available through the Live Well Springfield's website, and with links from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission as well. But then, okay, plan was created, and so then it went to Springfield's Department of Planning and went to our DPW, and so that it could get sign off to then go to the Springfield City Council to get approved. Nothing happens. Months go by. So then that's what triggered, by the next summer of 2015, a number of us who had been part of this ad hoc group said, we need to do something about this, and started just convening and meeting together and reaching out to folks who were involved with MassBike, folks who were involved with Walk Boston, which is the statewide pedestrian advocacy group, as well as just folks who had been on this advisory committee, and then others, word of mouth got around, that we're going to start meeting, because our first activity is to get this, we put this effort into having a policy and having a plan, getting it passed through the council, which we did in October of 2015. Then MassDOT comes out with its criteria for how it was going to judge these policies, and we were missing 10 words. So had to go back to the city, get the 10 words changed. We had to have another public hearing. And then finally, in February of 2015, we have a policy that's passed that then we can then go for the money for the complete streets implementation and come up with a prioritization plan. And so that was when that really helped our group actually keep meeting and keep having a purpose, because we had to come up with this prioritization plan. We developed a 5-year bicycle network, identified which intersections in Springfield made it sort of very difficult to ride through Springfield. We sort of we resented that.
Okay,
Here we go.
Thanks for sitting with us.
Yeah, so there's the summary. So anyway, now you can go to the next one. We're already into 2017.
You're a bit here.
But anyway, we get it passed. We then find we really need to work together. And so really our whole Complete Streets effort has really been a combined effort of working closely with our Department of Public Works. Unfortunately, the head engineer has just left. But we have the main person who is the boots on the ground in DPW still often attending our meetings, in close conversation with us, and he's learning. And we're learning. But then also that's when we really realized that we needed to have better connections with the other, and both non-governmental, such as we'd already had close connections with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, who nicely provide their conference room for our meetings, as well as then the other non-governmental groups such as Wayfinders. And I know this is a MassBike effort, but Walk Boston actually recognized that we have that these kinds of efforts are at least 3, if not 4 or 5-legged stools of groups of people working together to make things happen.
Yeah.
And so that was our golden shoe that we got last March.
And I want to applaud Betsy because she remembered everything on that slide. So and so Walk Bike, as you can see, really laid a tremendous foundation for advocacy around biking in Springfield. And I'll admit, our group isn't a bike advocacy group. We're really, like I said, complete streets and safe routes to school. And we know that complete streets includes every mode of transportation. But we know the community, the mode that needs more attention than any is probably our walking and our biking. And so that's where a lot of the passion comes from for these residents as well. And so this picture really reflects the unity of folks who are connected. We have Springfield Department of Health and Human Services in this picture, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. We have the Healthy Hill Initiative Resident Health Advocates. We have Walk Bike Springfield. I'm trying to think of who else is in this
Well,
picture.
Department of
And the city.
Public Works.
The Department of Public
Works.
Works. So
Yeah.
we really feel like we've accomplished a lot, and part of it is through this strong collaboration of with a shared vision for Springfield.
So these were just, and this is a combined successes of things that have actually happened over the last 4 years, and there are other people in this room who should probably chime in here, but the bicycle network and a prioritization plan, which now is 4 years old and needs to be updated. So then we've ended up having a direct participation in getting MassDOT Complete Streets funding by helping to write the narrative for the city. I mean, they were very good at coming up with, the fun, what things would cost and filling in the form, but coming up with the documentation and the sort of background. Pioneer Valley and us worked very closely in helping write that narrative. But then that has led to a lot more putting down paint on the streets. We got a new crosswalk policy passed in the city that now all additional crosswalks that are repainted, and particularly by schools, have to have the zebra design, not just the 2 lines. We now have, Catherine, how many miles of bike lane did you?
24.
20. And we were at a half. We were at like
in
in
2014.
yeah.
Wow.
And but then that's led to, we need to start advocating to the city, the mayor and the city council, that you're going to have to upgrade the amount of annual budget that you're putting into the city budget for painting roadways, because you're going to have that much more stuff that's going to have to be painted on an annual basis. We've got bike racks at most of the libraries now. Safe routes to, I should let Bea talk about the safe routes to school and the walking curriculum, but then we also got passed that we have a 25-mile-an-hour default speed limit in Springfield.
For many years.
But now we're having to, but then streetlights are, you fill in the,
So I'll go back a little bit and talk a little bit about safe routes to school. So we've been working closely with 2 neighborhood schools in Springfield around safe routes to schools, and really trying to get the policy implemented citywide. Here in Springfield, schools are pretty autonomous, so the principal can decide whether they're going to implement safe routes to school curriculum or any kind of safe routes to school practices. And when we first started our safe routes to school efforts, I believe we had 10 schools in Springfield. I know Patrick's is right there. And now I think we're up to 26 schools.
Yeah.
So, we've really made a lot of success there. But I think our biggest success has been really now the city has implemented the safe routes to school curriculum as a policy. So now every child at every school, elementary school, second grader will learn safe routes to school policy. It was very willy-nilly here. So now our next phase is obviously to get it implemented. So, it's been adopted, schools have to do it. And some, we find principals are embracing it fully, and some, are saying, now how do I add this into my already busy curriculum? So that's an area that we're gonna continue to forge ahead on.
because at least in Springfield, elementary schools are, the boundaries for most of the schools are drawn so that technically about 80% of all students should be walking to school, not happening.
Walking or biking?
Walking or biking, not happening, so we need to do, that's why we see this as a golden, it's not, students in this part of the city go way over there or way over there. Few cases like that, because of just where schools are, but in general, we have a great opportunity to really have, as I said, the vast majority of students walking and biking to school rather than the lineup of cars by every school.
Right. What we found is a lot of principals saying, oh, we have this severe drop-off pickup policy. You know, we've had instances in this city where people have been hit by cars at crosswalks and intersections at school let-out time. So that's a big deal, particularly when you're thinking, these are neighborhood schools. So our children can be walking and biking to school. And so there's obviously some reason as to why folks are not embracing that. And so at the 2 schools that we're work closely with, we're going to a 3rd school in the fall. But what we found is some of it was safety, public safety. So working with MassDOT, we were able to implement safe walk route maps. So we surveyed the school, parents, found out where children were walking from. We did walk assessments ourselves with Jeff from PVPC and MassDOT and you know, our resident health advocates, as well as some folks at the schools, to say, okay, what are safe? Let's identify safe routes. And by doing that, and then getting that out to parents, and then setting up a pilot walking school bus, we now have more children who are walking to school. And obviously, we're pushing biking as well. So this is, you know, we consider that a tremendous success, and particularly with the curriculum. And there's more to come, which we'll talk about later. But with regard to lighting, here in the city of Springfield, we had, doing these walk audits and walk assessments, we had a lot of residents say, well, there's lighting issues here. You know, this whole street is dark, and, you know, we kept hearing that narrative over and over. And so as a result, with our team sitting on the Built Environment Committee here in Springfield, we were able to share that directly with the city. And as a result, someone from the Health and Human Services Department, she's gone, but she said, how about we set up a subcommittee? You know, you're telling me that this is a chronic issue in Springfield. Let's see if that's really true. And as a result, we were able to get Eversource, which is our supplier for lights here in the city of Springfield. The city owns the poles, Eversource owns the lights. So we were able to get them at the table, and through a lot of advocacy, and I won't lie, even some, you know, you're obligated to provide us with lighting, and we have residents saying they're out.
600.
Are we going to get money back? You know, so even with some of that kind of level of influence, they did some groundwork themselves. It was actually 700 lights that were out. 700 lights that were out.
This is just one small, this isn't citywide.
Right,
This is
one
just,
neighborhood.
this is one neighborhood.
Well, no, that was citywide.
Oh, that was
700 was
citywide.
citywide.
Okay.
But basically, they didn't think there was a problem at all. So what we did on the grassroots side, the on the ground side, is we went to residents and we created even this, what we call the infrastructure reporting tool. And we taught folks how to download the 311 app, and we said, let's get busy, report as much as you can. The city has to see this is a big issue. And so, and then we even did some follow-up. Are you reporting? Are you reporting? And they started to get those influx of reports on lighting issues, but other issues too, you know, road issues, sidewalk issues. And that resulted in the city, Eversource, really having to do somewhat of an audit and discover this many lights are out. Now here's the problem. 700 were out, 600 were fixed. They said 100 there's complex issues, but now we found that there's about 400 back out. So our advocates are saying, so clearly we just put a Band-Aid on there. So what's the solution? So there's a lot of movement among the group in, you know, asking the city, what kind of maintenance plan is in place? How do we hold Eversource more accountable? And that has led to conversations about LED conversion. So, you know, we're excited about that.
Well, and also the whole this discussion about that's happening in a number of other places where the city actually buys the lights from Eversource, and so where it's not a dual system of city and Eversource, it would be just the city responsible. So
Yeah.
it's an ongoing discussion.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, the city wasn't even looking really fully at LED conversion. So now they're starting to run numbers. We know that's going to address climate issues here in Springfield, you know, environmental issues. So, like, we're excited to see the.
What is the percentage, if you know it, of the number of lights we have that are out? You think are out at any one time?
I don't know. So
Yeah.
what I did actually skip over there was to mention that the city council, there's one city councilor, Jesse Letterman, who's been very vocal on this, and he has asked for a lighting audit, so where we could actually go in, determine the number of lights out, but even the, is it sufficient coverage? Because we have residents saying that too. It's dark. So if you're gonna be biking and walking, you know, at night, like that's a big deal. You know, you're not safe if you're biking and walking in dark areas. So that's really a serious issue that we have to have addressed. And so I'm going to go back to the picture. But this picture is actually at a city council meeting with a couple of our councilors, because the advocates went and did a public speak out and spoke directly about their concerns about lighting, and that lighting resolution passed. So now, again, implementation, you know, that's a whole different thing. You can pass a policy, a resolution, or ordinance, but is it implemented? So again, that's the next step.
And then sort of moving forward, we got the city council to pass that the walking curriculum will be given to all second graders. We understand there is a similar bicycle curriculum that is geared towards fifth graders. Thank you, MassBike. And so that's one of this year's initiatives. There's a couple of school committee members who are in touch and quite involved with these youth who will be here at lunchtime. And so we're expecting that we have some allies on the school committee who are being primed to help us with getting this bicycle curriculum passed as well. One of the things Walk Bike has been working, and Todd conveniently left. He's been spearheading this issue. That there's some ordinances that go back many years in Springfield that made it illegal for anyone to ride on sidewalks outside of the business district. There's an ordinance that technically made the pedal assist valley bikes in Springfield illegal in Springfield, and some things like this that we've now finally getting the city council actually passing and cleaning up these ordinances. There was also this whole thing called Rules of the Road in Springfield that were not consistent with state law. So we again got the Traffic Commission and the City Council to say at least the language related to bicycles had to be consistent with state law. And so now that some of these ordinances are actually cleaned up, we're going to be doing outreach to the neighborhood councils, and there's a Good Neighbor publication the city puts out, and get more information about this, and including information about some of, what is a bike lane and where are vehicles, because we realize that most drivers, the only exposure they have to driving related to bicycling is when they're getting their driver's license back at age 16, 17, and maybe not even then, because they probably can pass the test without getting those questions wrong, and then never look at it again, or never know about it again. So we're trying to get some of these things about what a sharrow is, what parking, you don't park in a bike lane, some of these things into this Good Neighbor publication.
The bike box is not for the car to pull up through?
And stuff. I should Todd brought this idea that he saw this in Cincinnati with the 25-mile saves lives. The city, passed this policy, and then we waited 10 months to even get marginal signs at the entrance of Springfield telling you that's the city policy. In fact, the one that I thought was a good one but it was in the wrong direction is as you enter into Chicopee, there's a really nice sign that tells you, and then I realized, well, that's because Chicopee actually passed the same law, the policy, and we need it turned around as well.
A copy made.
So we've got, thanks to MassBike, Pioneer Valley's little grant program, 25 of these signs have been printed up, and we now have an initiative where we're, Sheila should really talk about our first trial has been this last couple weeks where you reached out to.
We've got 10 signs on Meredith Street in Forest Park and 10 signs on the north part of Crafton Road between the side park entrance and almost up to the elderly housing.
And that's by just asking residents, would you mind putting these in your front yard for a few weeks? And in general, residents go, great, you know.
And the strategy's going to be to have them on these streets for a while and then move them to East Springfield. That's our next target neighborhood.
And then we're looking, and we'll be recruiting residents to help, you know, we've had people have posted concerns about on the next door list thing. People complain about speeding left and right, so we've got a collection of people who would like to do something about speeding on their streets, and so we're looking to, and we're now also got outreach to the police department, who so far is endorsing this little grassroots effort to publicize that we want people to go slower in Springfield.
We're getting a new window, folks.
Yeah. Right. Can you hear us up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't want to walk around because of the construction.
So recently, about a week or so ago, Springfield was designated an age-friendly city, and so
Nice.
That's different.
So we actually got a triple designation here. So it's dementia-friendly. Excuse me. Our hospitals were designated age-friendly institutions, and the city was designated age-friendly. So we're really excited about that, but we also see it as an opportunity to.
Can you describe a little bit about what age-friendly city means?
Or
Okay.
dementia-friendly.
Okay.
What does that even mean?
Well, what it means is, I'll admit, I wasn't on that age-friendly committee, but from my knowledge and what I learned going through the summit that they had last week, age-friendly basically means the city is cognizant of the needs to service an aging population. So things like complete streets, you know, where we know that they have to be accountable for sidewalk upgrades and road upgrades and zebra striping at Sharrows. You know, there's a lot of categories that I don't know if
Well,
you want
it's both having that there's both programming and then healthcare and
Exactly.
and services that are addressing where we see the connections is that we can really, there's the built environment part.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Ben, because Ben
Benjamin.
was actually part of that effort. So.
Yeah, so the two focus, you basically, AARP lays out domains that you can sort of choose to work in. The two that the senior residents in Springfield lifted up were transportation and housing. So obviously you see a lot of linkages there with sort of built environment, quality of the physical environment with transportation and housing. And I just want to lift up from the city perspective, we are actually the first city in the entire country of the United States to have age-friendly city designation, dementia-friendly city designation, and age-friendly hospital system designation. No one else in the U.S. has that. I just want to lift that up.
But I think what we see is, as I said, this was literally last week that they had this summit, and we see it as an opportunity to really push for coming up with a speed management plan, not that where we don't just have a policy, a citywide speed limit plan, but we really look at what's our whole plan that includes what's the city going to do about education?
Yeah.
What are they going to do about the infrastructure? And what are they going to do about enforcement? But really, it actually comes back to these same,
Exactly.
so to really get control of, and if, one of the things that is really key related to age-friendly is it takes seniors longer to get across streets, and they won't be out walking, and they won't go to the senior center, or they won't do things if they really just fear for their lives getting across streets.
Right.
And Marvin wants to chime in on that one.
Yeah, I've had 3 close calls in the past
Yeah.
couple
And
of months.
so
2 of
that's
them within 2 weeks apart.
So that's what's all behind the concept of really getting the different agencies of the city, again, our sort of triple, the advocates, the non-governmental organizations, and the multiple government agencies working together. There's good publications out there, and
And I'm gonna
people like
interrupt.
David to help us come up
Good
with
luck.
a steep management plan.
No, I love
Good.
Betsy.
Are we also moving toward the 880 model?
Well, that is the
It's the same thing,
880.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
the same thing.
you just
Yeah.
mentioned the aging
Yeah.
part. I want to know
No,
if it-
8 to 80, that is the
880,
model.
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what he's referencing, the 880 model, is age 8 to 80. We want the city to be friendly for, the full spectrum of our lives. But the reason we have it up here is we see it as an opportunity to sort of seize this. Because we know that there's a lot that we can connect to the city being an age-friendly city. So, obviously we're constantly advocating for funding, for complete streets prioritization. So if we're saying, hey city, this is important, you're embracing this age-friendly, designation, that's awesome. So let's also put some money behind that. So we see this as an opportunity to really seize this feel-good moment and say, let's really live up to the standard that's been identified here in Springfield. So that's one of the reasons we put it as a moving forward. So, any city leaders in here? But anyway.
Benjamin.
No, but really, we know the city, we'd like to think they have everyone's best interest at heart. But I think now is the time for residents to say, you've created this standard, let's put some money behind it. Because often that's what the issue becomes, is there sufficient funding for the things that we're advocating for? We can yell and scream and shout, but we also know that funding is essential to sort of get things in motion. So.
And it is tricky in Springfield because Springfield was bankrupt a dozen years ago and is, it's still tight.
Yeah.
Nope.
Or Marvin.
I just want to suggest that money isn't the only important thing, but police enforcement
Yep.
comes
Yeah.
in very significant play.
Again,
Not only did I have 3 close calls, but there was a death in the crosswalk
Yes.
right outside my building in December.
Yeah.
Nothing has been done.
It's these E's all over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And that's an area that we're working with as well.
So one of the things we're doing along those lines is both Wayfinders and Walk Bike Springfield have come up with questions that we're going to be posing to our mayoral candidates and our city council candidates, as much to educate them. Hopefully we'll get responses back, but at least it's a way to let these candidates know what our issues are that we want them to be concerned about. You'll hear more about the all-wheel park at lunchtime. We've got Liz here working on the McKnight Trail and just really keeping our, getting our multi-use paths out, and then improving the river walk is all part of that, because we don't want people to just think, well, the only multi-use paths that you can really go bike riding on are up in Northampton and East Hampton.
Yeah.
They're here in Springfield as well. And then, as I said, our bike network and our prioritization plan are all of a sudden almost 5 years old. We've got to be really relooking at them and coming up.
And with regard to safe routes to school, so we were happy to see that the city embraced the use of a curriculum. Now we actually want them to adopt safe routes to school practices as a policy, particularly around site design. I see Patrick over there smiling. But you know, in Springfield, what we're finding is the city is moving toward consolidating a lot of our elementary schools. We have, you know, a lot of really old schools here, and really an abundance of city elementary. I think 50.
56, I think.
Yeah. There's more than 50 elementary schools. So they're saying, how do we make this work with neighborhoods that are adjoining, where children can still fall within that walk-bike radius to get to the school? And so they started one in the North End neighborhood of Springfield. And for the first time ever, someone from Safe Routes to School, an engineer, as well as a Safe Routes to School coordinator, was at the table with the city and Springfield Public Schools to talk about design.
Good.
Have you thought about these practices around designing the school? And the answer was no. And so, but as a direct result of those conversations and that input, they made some adjustments to design. And so now we want that to be a policy. We want, whenever the city goes to building a new school, to consolidating or merging a new school, that Safe Routes to School is automatically part of that process. So that's another area that we're moving forward on. And that's it for us.
Well, Patrick, yeah.
No, I just wanted to say we all kind of laughed that they hadn't thought about safe routes principles. That's not necessarily the fault of the school designers. Like everything, transportation policy has changed a lot over the last 60 years. And so by no means do I want to say that, while we'd like to see us included, by no means is it a flaw that we weren't included before. We've just evolved and we realized that we should reconsider things. So I think anyone who is involved with school design, by no means are they doing a poor job. We just found a way for them to do a better job.
Right, and we know that has to come from residents. Residents have to say to their elected leaders, their school committee members, this is what we want. This is important to us. So again, we're here to represent advocacy and so, you know, our grassroots efforts, and so that's where it falls in.
And I will say there is a publication that Walk Bike Boston has put out on school design, you know, walking to school, school design principles. That is, I think it's downloadable from the website, their website, or at least requestable from their website. So if folks are interested in getting that, you know, as a document to help use for advocacy, that's a source of a publication.
Yeah, Sarah?
I think I want to add to what Patrick said. The other issue is that when you're doing a new school, you may need to have new sidewalks and other infrastructure. And while the state contributes to the cost of schools, they don't contribute to those other infrastructure costs. So the DPW definitely encouraged us to kind of raise that issue.
Yes, yeah. And that's one of the reasons we've tagged this movement infrastructure justice. We have residents who are saying now, you know, I didn't even know what the word infrastructure meant. And now they're like, and if I say that word one more time, you know, it's like calling out their child's name, because, you know, that's how frequently they're using that. So we're really excited about that.
You mentioned that statistic that about 80% of kids in their elementary schools are close enough to walk, but a lot of them are being driven by cars. Is that the main reason? Lack of infrastructure? What are you hearing? What's the main reason why kids aren't walking or biking?
So I think it's assorted reasons. I think some of it is infrastructure. Some of it is public safety in some neighborhoods, actual concern for their safety and well-being of their children. Some of it is lack of education. You know, when I grew up, I walked to school, you know, and that's how I was taught, you know, and so we have years of where that really hasn't been in the school, you know, so that's why getting that Safe Routes to School curriculum implemented back into the system is so important, because hopefully we might not see that transition in the next 5 years, but as that generation ages and has children themselves, that's what their children are going to learn. They're going to feel safer walking to school. They're going to embrace it more. So, you know, it's a variety of reasons that we found.
And that's why the walking school buses, where the concept that you have adults being at certain locations at certain times and walking and
Right.
picking up kids who have come to a given, parents only have to bring them to a given point and then know they'll walk the remaining blocks to school together with other children and other adults, is helping to, it's breakdown, it's just sort of, it's what they just haven't been used to.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it is just, they just weren't doing it.
Yeah.
I also
we're
have a
creatures of habit, and,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the pattern has been, you know, parents are now, we've got working moms and dads, and you know they're racing off to work. It's almost easier to drop them off, but what's happening? You know, we've got carbon emissions going up. There's congestion at the school. There's safety issues. So that's where the education
No
has
exercise.
and no lack of exercise. So all that has, we're kind of teaching that
Yeah.
again. You know?
Well, one thing that I hope you don't overlook is similar to bike parking at all the libraries that's
Yes.
been implemented, bike parking at
At
every
every
school.
school.
Yeah.
Because kids need a safe place to park their bikes once they
Right.
get there.
Yeah.
And that, we've definitely,
And I'm
Had that on
concerned
our
when,
agenda.
when you have mentioned the idea of consolidating and not having so many local schools. The school has traditionally been a place where meetings occurred and other things happen, and you fragment the community. It's probably something that's cheaper in the short run, but I'm afraid it'll cause a whole lot of trouble in the long run.
luckily so far, the schools that they are consolidating are almost literally across the street from each other.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
you know, got Dewberry and Homer, or you've got the Lincoln and the
Brightwood.
I mean, and, it's not Brightwood, but anyway,
Yeah,
they're
it's Lincoln.
they're within 2 blocks of each other
Yeah.
to
That's
begin
not
with.
so bad, but
And then
taking
you
one
put
out of a neighborhood
you put-
entirely
No,
would be-
no,
Right.
they're not
no,
doing that
No, they're
so
not
far.
taking out of I mean, there's even as they're approaching this, and again, we don't know. Right now, we know of one that's already planned, and one that's a few years away. So it just appears that this is a model they're moving in because the schools in Springfield, some of them are, you know, they're 100+ years old.
Right.
So even the buildings, really, they're not meeting code. The cost to improve the buildings is astronomical. So I think they're hoping that this will address, you know, a myriad of issues. So, but that's a valid
I'm
one
just,
of the
point.
things we have to
I have no
stay-
problem with that. I'm just concerned that model goes
It's gonna
forward.
be one of our things we have to stay on top of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Liz?
top on it.
Or,
I was just gonna make a comment, in regards to safe routes to schools. I learned that Rebecca Johnson has a safe routes to schools program. I commend them. But they don't do it in the winter time.
Well,
We did a cleanup and we cleaned up their routes.
so I'm going to tell you the
That
challenge.
they were starting at the after spring vacation.
So here's the challenge.
Yeah,
In order to facilitate a walking school bus, you need adults.
right.
And so even, for example, at Dewberry School, where we had this pilot program, so teachers were walking. Springfield College is a wonderful partner organization that we've worked with. So they had their college students volunteering to walk, do some of the routes. And we, Wayfinders, and some of our resident health advocates have volunteered to do the routes. Catherine has walked, you know, and so, and then parents. And so the unfortunate thing is, it's hard to get the parents because they're going to work. And so, you know, that I don't know if that's an issue, but I know at Dewberry it's a big issue. And so we had, thankfully, a couple of teachers who were really avid champions for this. So even next year, you know, there's talk of how do we keep this going, because one teacher is now going to be doing a girls run program in the morning, and another teacher is going to be doing a healthy eating program, and then there's a math program. So that's the thing. So part of it is just the lack of bodies. You know,
Yeah.
we really do need to
and
get
it's harder to get bodies in the winter.
exactly.
Right, and that's why I don't mean it as a criticism,
Yeah.
since I haven't volunteered to help kids walk. I can't criticize other people, and
Yeah.
it's the volunteers in the winter thing.
Yeah.
Let's do
Like,
one more
and
question.
how Brookings addressed that, for example, is they don't have walking school buses, but to encourage kids to walk, they have a walking club. So 2 of our resident health advocates, they on their own, they manage a walking club on Monday and Friday when kids tend to not come. That's when the highest absentee rates are. And there's a lot of ways we incentivize the children's participation, so that gets them walking, because the walking club is before school, you're walking to school, they're not playing in the parking lot, they're not around the sidewalk. So, that's been successful, and that's another model that we're hoping to use.
Let's do one more question.
Yeah, Alex.
I just wanted to introduce an interesting concept that I've noticed around the city, and that has to do with parents driving kids to school, is that the car is really still a part of the American dream. And I think especially in a lower income community, achieving having a family vehicle in a city like Springfield where 20% of the population does not have a vehicle, this is something of pride. They've earned a car and they've earned the right to drive to school. And I wonder if anybody has any thoughts on how we can promote the concept of choosing to cycle or choose to walk in this sort of culture where having a car is an amazing asset for a family relative to some other families.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen that as an issue as it relates to getting to school. Maybe in general, culturally it might be, but really, like the parents, like for example, at one of the schools, to sort of alleviate some of the burden of the drop-off situation, we now have police there. They've marked the areas, no parking, because there was a lot of idling and just, a lot of issues. So now they're parking in the Mason Square parking area. So even when I've gone with flyers and I'm trying to talk to parents who are waiting, I think their fear of harm to their kids is that greater issue. That's what we hear, is more, well, how will I know my daughter's going to be safe walking, and what, how do I know they're not going to be abducted? How do I know
they actually got there?
Yeah.
How do they actually know they actually got home?
So I think that's a more pervasive issue. Yeah.
I'll cover that in a second.
Okay.
Cool. Round of applause for.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience too on the technology issues.
Awesome. That was really inspiring. I think a few things I got out of that were the need to really activate the community to elevate the conversation, and the idea that Springfield was a default 12 years ago, had 0 bike lanes 5 years ago, and to see the sea change happen from a policy standpoint, from a top-down standpoint, meeting where the grassroots was. You wouldn't have been able to have that top-down change if you didn't have the grassroots activation. So keep in mind, we're going to have a lot of conversations about policies and such, and this might segue perfectly into Becky's presentation here. Where did I put it? Right here. Which is talking about the demo days that were set up by the PVPC and Becky to help inspire and educate what Complete Streets is, a kids' understanding of Complete Streets, so that you get the buy-in from the community. And with that, I'll give it up to Becky Bash from the DVPC to inspire you to put out some bales of hay and make yourself a protected bike lane.
Yeah, so,
Find the hay.
I'm going to talk about a couple of Complete Streets demonstration days that PVPC did in collaboration with many of these other organizations, including Walk Bike Springfield and the Residents Health Advocates. Just to really give people an experience of what a Complete Street looks like in a day. So the idea for this came from the term tactical urbanism. Is anyone familiar with this term?
Yeah.
So the Tactical Urbanist Guide to Materials and Design defines it as a city organizational or citizen-led approach to neighborhood building using short-term, low-cost, and scalable interventions to catalyze long-term change. There have been some other tactical urbanism events in Northampton and in Williamsburg, just trying out some improvements to the village center. But ours have been in Springfield for the last 2 years. And so why a Complete Streets Demonstration Day? It's really an opportunity to collaborate with a number of organizations and educate on the ground, right hands-on education. It's an opportunity to get people out and educate them on what Complete Street is and have them advocate and send postcards to the mayor, the city council, Walk Bike Springfield, while we were planning this, felt it was really important to have this be a fun event, so celebrate. So rather than calling it a complete streets demonstration day, we called it Walk and Roll Celebration, in an effort to get more people out there. These events have been funded for the last 2 years by the Transforming Communities Initiative grant that Bea mentioned earlier, from Trinity Health and in conjunction with Mercy Hospital in Bay State. It was a grant to Live Well Springfield, which is made up of 30 organizations who are working to build and sustain a culture of health in Springfield. It focuses on social determination of health, so improving policies, systems, and environmental change, and mainly among young children in Springfield. And some of the partners again are Mercy Medical Center, Public Health Institute of Western Mass, Wayfinders, MLK Family Services, the Springfield Food Policy Council, Square One, and Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and there's probably more that I haven't mentioned. That's the grant. And then the neighborhoods that are the focus of the Transforming Community Initiative grants are these neighborhoods in gray. And these are the 2 locations where the Complete Streets demonstration days within. The first was in Memorial Square, so right across from the Lincoln Elementary School. So there was some, looking at the sidewalks and safer to school, walk audit, improvements. So in 2018, they put bike lanes on both sides of the street, and did some improved crosswalks and an enhanced crosswalk and improved school zone markings. And then this year we did it on Walnut Street, across from the park, and across from the street went right by the Mason Wright Retirement Community, which is also a daycare center, is located across from this lovely little park, and there was no crosswalk to get from the retirement community to the park. So one of our improvements was to put in a crosswalk in that location. Also to enhance crosswalks on either end of the extent of the road, or a few bus stops, and also there have been no bike lanes there, so we put in some bike lanes. So this is just a close-up of some of the planned improvements. New crosswalk, bike lanes. We did some floating bus stops because there is a bus every 30 minutes that goes down that street, and they needed to show where people would stand to get the bus. And then we did some bulb outs at that intersection to make the crossings a little shorter for people.
What is a floating bus stop?
It just means that rather than pulling over for the curb, the bus stops right in the travel lane. So people walk out to the bus, so the bus doesn't interfere with the bike traffic going into the
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So on the collaboration side, this was an effort that had many hands. MassBike and Reg Springfield were there with Alex was a key player with his mobile bike fix-it station at the event in the park, and also with his truck to help us with cones that we put all along the street to pick them up and drop them off at City Hall. We had Walk Boston there with a table, and Valley Bike was there with some demo bikes, which were a big hit. Then we worked with the city to actually pick the location, and the Parks Department through the permitting process, and sort of had to meet with them and get everything okay in terms of what we were doing in the park. Water Department came with a water station and free water bottles that you could fill up from the city water, which is actually very good city water and a great demonstration of that. And then we had a policeman there to direct traffic while we were setting up. Then also Walk Bike Springfield helped with deciding what kind of improvements to do and looking at the site with me and being there to volunteer and set up. And the MLK Family Center, Peer Health Advocates, I'm going to talk about on the next slide. They were a really key group of kids who came and helped with the setup and the cleanup and actually these MLK peer health advocates, this is a group that's out of the MLK Family Services Center. High school kids that sign up for an after-school health program over the course of the year, and they learn about different types of health businesses and organizations, and have been doing a lot of work on tobacco cessation. But since a lot of these kids are interested in doing another year of work, they're moving into active living issues, and so they are looking at complete streets. So they had a series of community connections dinners where they go out to different organizations and businesses and have dinner. And a couple weeks before the demonstration day, Catherine organized this dinner with the kids, and they walked around our office at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and went to different workstations and learned what each of us did at the Planning Commission, mostly around complete streets and the demonstration day. And then 2 weeks later came out at 7 in the morning and helped us paint the streets. And we had the safety vests.
And had fun.
And had a great time. They sat up, they manned the Black Bike Springfield table for much of the day and helped us clean up. So it was a really great collaboration and education event for the kids. And actually one of them has signed up to be an intern with us this summer, which is really great. So on the education side, it's really an opportunity to educate the community in an experiential way, and so they can see what a bike lane would look like on the ground. It educates drivers, buses and cars to say, oh, what's this? Have to slow down with the bike lane there. Bicyclists and pedestrians, there were a lot of bikers using the bike lanes that day. And then these are also an opportunity for the city to see what works and what doesn't work in a temporary way. We were actually, when we first got out there, we said, is this road going to be wide enough for a bike lane? And we measured it, and it was 16 feet travel lane, and the city's policy is to have a 10-foot travel lane. So we made a 6-foot bike lane. And the buses were fine, the cars were fine, it all fit, and it was a great, pretty good sized bike lane that we were able to create. And then on the advocacy side, we had postcards that people could fill out to send to the mayor saying, we want you to repair the roads, we want more complete streets in our neighborhood, add bike lanes, add crosswalks, and it was a good event to get people out there. And then this is just a celebration side with Alex and his cowboy hat. Little bike rodeo. And kids, and we had some capes to give to the kids, climate action capes. It's really great to have an event associated with a Complete Streets Demonstration Day, so it's something that people can come to, ride their bikes to get there, and an attraction. Last year, I think they had a DJ there as well, but the budget didn't allow for it this year, unfortunately. So just in terms of setting this up, it's good to start early, and I didn't actually start in December. I think I started in February getting this set up, and it was a little crunched. But it's good to really form a team in the beginning to talk about the site and what you want to do. And then January, select a site and a date for the event and develop a plan, because you have to go through this permitting process, which is many months. Apply for permits in February. I think I got mine in late February, and I got the permit 3 days before the event. So it's, especially, I don't know if it's the same in other cities, but
Yep. It definitely is in Boston, yeah.
yeah, I'll talk about that.
Well, and lesson learned from the year before is right up front, choose a rain date.
Yes.
Because since you're putting down water-soluble paint, you can't do it on a wet day. And we didn't, in year one, we didn't have a rain date until after it rained. So it put it off another 2 months or a month and a half. This year, we had a rain date, so we didn't have to use it.
Right. We were very fortunate. It was the one day of bike week. that it didn't
Insurance.
rain.
Yeah.
And it was the first day of bike week, so it was a kind of a
Yes.
nice kickoff event. And then just start to gather supplies and recruit volunteers at least a month early. Get a press release, posters, flyers, getting the word out to get people out there. In terms of site selection, again, it was, we selected a site in a Transforming Community Initiatives neighborhood.
funded by
It
them.
was a road where the city had already planned to do improvements, so the idea was to put these temporary improvements out, get people to really push for getting it done, and then it'll get done, and they'll say, oh, look, we did, we helped with actually making a change in our neighborhood.
Well, in fact, there is now a bike lane on Chestnut Street where the Complete Streets was the year before.
Yeah, it's a great, so it's, so it's showing progress. Also, it's good to have it near a park or a school to have the resource there. Last year was near a school, and not as many permit fees, but another permit was involved to that, so.
But last year, I can remember a little girl on her pink tricycle all the time, going up and down, having a ball all day long.
I think she was there this year too.
Yeah, she was having such fun. Oh gosh.
So, you have to make this plan for the permit also. So, that was the plan to give to the DPW. I did another plan for the park, and I had to set up a meeting with the Parks Department to talk about where to have the resource table and where to have the bike rodeo. And, if we wanted water, we had to figure out where that goes. If you want to have food, you have another permit stop with the health department. And we actually decided not to have food at this event because there's some local restaurants right across the street. And I think they were pretty happy to have, people coming to the restaurants. And there was actually an ice cream stand across the street, which was great. Permit process itself is kind of unbelievable and really a huge barrier. If a community organization is going to do one of these events and someone doesn't have a car, it's basically impossible, I think. You have to go to City Hall first, and then they check off on the events form all the different departments you have to go to and in what order. And you have to drive to each of these departments. So I did a little map of my route.
Yep.
You could go on bicycle.
And you can't do it in a day because some places you have to leave the permit and they have to look at it. So the police department actually had it for 2 weeks because people were on vacation. So I had to go back there a couple times. This is a 17-mile journey if done in a day, but with all the back and forth, it was probably 25 miles or so at least. So that's one recommendation we have for the city is to make that process a little easier. And then the site considerations, this year we had counted on the park rental fee and the maintenance deposit fee at the park. We had to have police presence there in the morning because we were painting a crosswalk on the road so the police could direct traffic and gave us some space. At the schools, again, you need a different permit there. And then parking, we were able to get the Springfield Technical Community College allowed us to use their parking lot for the day on the street because there was actually no parking right out the park. For supplies, we had some templates which we had our graphics department make actually last year, and we were able to use them again. They made these bike symbols and some arrows out of mylar, so we were able to reuse those. And you can also use cardboard. Had a lot of chalk to use with the templates. Temporary signs. We had a pedestrian crossing sign that Jeff had made that we stuck on with Velcro and zip ties onto the post to where the new crosswalk was. A lot of white duct tape. We did about 1,000 feet of road, so we had 60, well, at least 20 rolls of duct tape. We had a lot left over from last year, and that made the striping. Cornstarch and tempera paint for the paint. Had a lot of cornstarch. Went through the whole, probably 20 boxes of that. And we have to bring water the budget for permits was ended up between, it was about $439 because we did get our deposit back. New supplies, it ran between $700 and $900. And I think part of that was we did some posters. Part of that was the total was between $700 and $900, so about $300 for supplies. And we actually had a lot left over from last year, so it's, you know, it's relatively inexpensive for a complete street, but it's not free. So you really want to figure out your budget ahead of time and have money available. So again, lessons learned: start early, and pick a site. And as Betsy said, pick a rain date. I didn't include that on there. And then you really have to come up with the details up front so you can go through the permitting process one time and don't have to go back. We're recommending that the city upgrade their permitting process to allow neighborhood groups to really participate in these kind of events.
Would it be really easier, better, if the permits were available online and submitted online?
Yes, that would be.
It just seems to me that
Benjamin.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. So just for perspective, for folks who are on the other side of that permitting process, it's not any easier for us either. The amount of documentation that we have to provide to City Hall, and the amount of signatures, and the amount of running back and forth, and this one's not in her office, so you have to get a signature from this one, but it has to go back, but that's backdated because it's from last fiscal year. I don't know how many of you, not many, Catherine worked on a grant called 1422 with me, which was the same size as TCI, and it sometimes took 4 months to get people contracts.
Yeah.
So that's how complicated and messy and how long stuff sits in City Hall. On our end, when we're trying to get you the stuff can sit in City Hall for weeks. I mentioned earlier the city's technologically challenged. Our IT department for the entire city of Springfield is 3 people.
Oh my.
3 humans. I think they're looking at hiring a 4th. So that's 3 people for fire department, police department, health department, everybody. The school department has their own, thank God. But so this is really one obviously a funding thing, but really like a capacity sort of infrastructure city site thing, right?
You must have a large burnout rate in the IT department.
Well, the city council just passed a budget item, or approved a budget item that at least is going to update, is going to do a major upgrade of the police fire IT system.
Yeah.
So on that end, but that doesn't help everything else here.
Yeah.
So.
But we'd love to centralize everything and have it online.
So we'll
because
work
it
on
would make
that.
it just as less painful for us as it is for you guys.
Yeah.
So I hear you. I just wanted to
Yes.
respond to that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm wondering, how many hours did you spend in this? Like 100 hours probably? More?
She spent about 75, I think.
Okay.
But, and this is a complete street demo, but this could be any tactical urbanism
Yeah.
issue. I mean, related to complete streets, it could be, projects around, complete Mass DOT just did a webinar on tactical urbanism, emphasizing safe routes to school projects, where a given school does a day's worth of demo about how they could improve the walking around the school. So it could be that kind of project as well. I mean, I think it's not just a straight complete streets, it's any kind of.
And my concern is that sections of the city people will interpret these difficulties in getting permits as an active attempt to try and squash people from doing things. Especially in some areas of the city that have experienced negative discrimination before.
Well, and one thing, for example, when I mentioned that Wayfinders and Walk Bike have these questionnaires we're trying to give to the mayoral and city council questionnaires, I went down to the election department last week to get now that the candidates are just certified, get the list of who's running. I had to fill out a form for a public information request to get them to give me, to then mailed to me the list of
Yeah,
candidates.
you couldn't get it right away, you had to have it mailed, right?
I had to fill out a public information request form to get them to send it to me, and they still haven't sent it to me. I mean, so Springfield does have its layers of, let's see if we can put barriers between people doing things in this city.
Or so it's perceived, yeah.
So I was just gonna say, so I'm curious, and maybe Patrick might know this through the Safe Routes to School program, because I think your event sounded wonderful, and it sounded really cool and like an inspiration for other places, and I'm sorry that the permitting was really horrible, but is that like, because I would hate to have that become like a deterrent for other communities to try these sort of things, and like encouraging them, so I don't know if you know of other towns, and maybe it's not, and maybe it's like, feels a little more complicated.
It is.
An example of good.
Yeah, I would say, without knowing exact municipalities, I know that in North Adams, they did a parklet, that without knowing the permit process, just by the sheer scope of size, that the North Adams process probably was easier. I think it also depends on the given community. Some communities, well, not directly related, we were talking about this in the car when we were coming here, depending on the community and how active they are, some communities have less red tapes. Certain communities across the Commonwealth sometimes are just able just to do it. It really depends on, I would say that I wouldn't say that every community is as difficult as Springfield, so there's definitely opportunity.
Well, and when
There's a
Northampton,
size
It's
component
not that,
too.
it's not that difficult. I mean, it's difficult, but it's still very doable, and it's still worth the effort. And we did it in Northampton as a much more spontaneous thing. The image that Becky showed in Northampton was much more spontaneously planned. We did it in Williamsburg with a little bit more planning, but I mean, again, maybe the permitting part was, 5 or 6 or 7 hours of time. It sounds hideous, but that's not bad. I mean, it's back and forth, but it's not that cumbersome.
It's just good to know
The more often you do it, the easier it gets.
Exactly.
They say, oh, here she is again.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
The street department was really
Reliable.
helpful. I have to say, the Parks Department was great. They just wanted to go over some details and find out exactly what we're doing, but everyone was really helpful. But it is helpful to know upfront, that you may need time. And I was fortunate that my colleague, Ashley Eden, who organized the event last year, did a whole guide or a whole report on, step by step what you have to do, and by the way, the permit process may be really long.
And again, that was the point of the project was, we worked with the city, we had funding, we said, we're gonna document this process because we know it's complicated, and so we did, and then we followed it again the next year, and now it's documented, so you can do it again next year, and as Sheila says, it gets easier and easier the more you have the relationships.
well, and then like in Northampton, they actually have a point person sustainability coordinator who is in City Hall, who then can help facilitate everybody. We now have that in Springfield. So again, even next year, there's even a person within the city now who we can go to if we're a barrier. Not that he'll necessarily have things any easier than anybody else, but at least it's somebody, it's a single person in the city whose job is to help us do these things.
Well, I was just going to be a volunteer, having just been through that permitting process for the McKnight Neighborhood Council recently. I know what it's like, and next year, I volunteer to take the responsibility of getting the permit through.
Give it up, guys.
And I should mention also that we did have a volunteer, Awilda Sanchez,
Oh, yeah.
part of Walk Bike Springfield.
No, and Wayfinders.
And Wayfinders, and she translated all of our materials.
Oh,
Pro bono,
she's
which
great.
was amazing.
Wow.
And was happy to do it.
Shannon's got a thought over here.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to speak up on polio, because I'm part of the bike committee there, and we did a bike breakfast, and we planned it on the fly last minute, and it was a very easy process with polio. Also in Northampton, I worked with students from Smith College who have a park kit, and so we went all around town with the park kit, and there was really just speaking to the parks departments or speaking to the private owners. We didn't have to get permits or anything, and they set up their whole park kit, and we do Valley Bike demos and hand out information and things like that. We did about 8 different things.
So just other logistics, you know, get trucks, volunteers, supplies early, and look at your budget, and work on outreach to get people out there. So I have a couple of resources. I have a few copies of my presentation, or I'd be happy to email them to anyone. And about it. Any other questions, thoughts?
I just wanted to say that when the police officer was there at 7 in the morning with all the youth from the Martin Luther King Family Center, he rides his bike to work on that road, and he was so excited that there was going to be a protected bike lane. So you find allies, you know, as you go along.
Yeah. And I think it's important to us to write to the Department of Public Works and tell them how much we enjoy the bike lane. Or the other complete streets. The comments coming back in of how much you enjoyed it, how much you appreciated that it's there, I think mean a whole lot more than complaints that it's not there yet.
Cool. Thank you, Becky, so much. All right, so we heard a little bit about community activation. I wrote down the word infrastructure justice. So what I want to do, first off, this is also a public health event. So everybody stand up, shake it out, stretch.
Oh boy.
Okay, we're gonna take 15 minutes. We're delaying our agenda about 15 minutes. I hope that's all right for the next presenters, but we'll be quick. I want us to break into 2 groups, just 2, and float around. For the next 15 minutes, stretch your legs. I'll turn the ACs back on. I have 2 papers that I put up on the board, and I want you to approach these from your background. Wherever you're coming from, if you're an advocate, if you're a professional, if you're just here for the food, I don't care. Whatever infrastructure justice means to you and your community and your background, and what does community activation mean to you and your background. I've got pens I'll come pass around. Try to hit both papers, try to mingle, try to stretch your legs. Oh, I should have said the restrooms are down the hallway as well. Through the to the right, the library over there. And there's also one behind me, but everyone will know when you go in there because it's right behind the presenter, but that's all right. And we'll take about 15 minutes. I'll call us to order with the bike bell around 11:45 for the next round of presenters, but try to get to both of these papers in the meantime. Thank you. Mark, student chairs, right? Well, I was going to use it to
Okay, that's fine.
Papers.
Oh, David, you go put the guy straight? I saw you leaving and about the time was banging.
No. Just a coincidence.
Yes, it was. But it all stopped after you left. Sounded like that might be what happened.
I have never seen such. I could run. I have never lived anywhere.
I'm also a safer.
Is there a bike?
There is. Yeah, I'm talking about one.
Yeah, I know the city planner.
You know Jeff Beck. Yeah, well.
Cool.
We should have something like this.
Yeah.
That's right. They're going to consolidate all the cool.
Yeah, we are wave makers.
Yeah, because the old school.
Let's see the impact kind of make its way through town.
Yeah, the elementary schools are all over 100 years old.
I don't doubt that.
Well, no, this is going on at grounds where the wind service.
Second here.
And we're going to have built all the buildings.